Welcome. I'm Dr. Owen Anderson, and I'm joined today with Arizona State Representative Quang Nguyen, and he is doing some excellent work that I want to bring to your attention. I want to ask him a few things today. I just found out that he's giving a speech in Tempe about against communism. Is that right? And can you tell us about that?
Yes, sir. I was invited last month by Riders USA. It's a group of motorcyclists, constitutional, conservative. They wanted me to come and give a quick update on the legislative action we just had this past session, and also talk about communism, a subject that I barely understand.
Well, you say
Of
that
course, I'm being sarcastic.
exactly. Tell our viewers about why that's sarcastic.
Well, yeah, occasionally I will have people that actually come up to me and said, I just don't understand communism because what I experience is not the modern day uh, Communist Party in the United States. And I just, if that's okay, I just laugh.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um,
Well, sometimes you get
yeah,
sometimes
the
if
animal, this doesn't change the spots, if you know what I mean.
right, yeah. Well, it can kind of try to remarket itself as friendly and just helping
Right.
out the downtrodden. And really, I mean, people have pointed out since Karl Marx started writing that he's just borrowing ideas from Christianity, but rejecting God and Christ. So he observed Methodist revivals, for example, and said, hey, these are great. These are helping workers get rights and be treated with human dignity and respect. So he saw things like that happening among Christians, but then he wanted to do the same thing without Christ or without God or without the scriptures.
I was just thinking, Dr. Anderson, I was just thinking about this last night. I was thinking about what I was going to say today, and it's kind of dawned on me. The last time we spoke, what did I say? If you get control of food source, if you get control of guns, if you get control of the education about children, that's a perfect storm, right? That's what
Mm-hmm.
my dad used to teach me. But now it's even more simple to define communism. Um, if you, and by the way, it is the perfect slavery system. I mean, isn't it amazing when the government has all the power? And how do you get it done here? If you want to get it done here, all you have to do is remove two things, the First and the Second Amendments. Think about it. No free speech,
Mm-hmm.
no
Yeah.
religion. You can't petition the government and you can't assemble. And the next thing you do is take away the right to keep and bear arms.
Yeah.
We're done if that
Yeah.
happens.
Well, that's right. And of course, it's never branded that way. It's always presented as we're pro free speech, just like in the novel 1984. You'll have Newspeak,
Mm-hmm.
where you redefine words, where freedom of speech means the government telling you what you can say. That's freedom of speech. Or
Exactly. If
in my
you
case, other professors determining when you can and can't say something and what you can speak about on campus.
It's kind of scary. You think about it. Last year, and the year before, we introduced uh, a bill that would actually allow CCW holders to be able to carry on campus, right? That
Yeah.
bill was killed every single time, right?
Oh, yeah.
So think about it. You have the infringement of the First Amendment, as you can see at ASU. This is the reason why you and I are on the phone now talking to each other. And then you can't have your firearms. Um, that's a tiny little segment, into the window,
Yeah.
into the big window, right?
But here's something I always get. If whenever I bring up Marxism or communism, someone on the left will just roll their eyes and say, "Oh, come on, this is the Senator McCarthy hearings. You see it. You see a communist behind every tree. Communism is not a big threat." What do you respond? How do you respond to that?
100 million people killed. Simple.
Yep.
How is such a nice system that is responsible for more than 100 million people killed in slightly over 100 years, right?
Yep.
So that's my answer right there. And by the way, unlike the Holocaust, it hasn't stopped. It's still going.
Yeah. We still
People are
see.
still being executed in communist countries.
Yeah. Well, and one thing I suggest too is just besides the political side of it and finding conspirators, because I think the Senator McCarthy got into trouble with looking for conspirators. Besides those things, Karl Marx and the Marxist philosophy is free online. You can read all about it, and you can determine for yourself: is this what college professors are teaching? Are they teaching that all of history is a class conflict or a race conflict or a gender conflict? Are they teaching that big government is the only solution to these problems? So it's not hard to look it up yourself and determine, is this philosophy really still being taught?
You know what? People like Ben Toma and myself, survivors of two different communist regimes, right?
Yep.
So all you have to do is call one of us up. We'll be
Yep.
happy to go out there and talk to you. You don't have to read books. You don't have to read. You don't have to listen to your professor. You don't have to do anything. Just
Yep.
call one of us. We'll be happy to travel out there on our own dime and speak to your
Yeah.
class.
Call a survivor, right?
Right,
They like to speak
right.
about survivors. Well, let's call one of the survivors and see what actually happened.
Exactly. And you know, I can tell you right now, it's not being taught. Let's go back to 1956. The evils of communism used to be taught at the, I believe, Flagstaff High School district. And after that, it's gone.
Yeah, they're not
So
allowed to.
I was actually reading a couple of comments from students who took the class, and one of them said, "Hey, listen, uh, I always hated communism, but now I actually have reasons to hate communism after
Mm-hmm.
taking the class." I think
Yeah.
that's how important it is. And thank God, House Bill 2008 that was introduced last year was signed into law that would force the State Board of Education to develop curriculum
Yeah.
to teach about the evils of communism. And that's going to start in 2026.
Well, that kind of overlaps with this question I have for you because you're a co-chair of a legislative committee looking into the state universities and free speech. And so it overlaps with that because probably 99%, maybe higher, 99.9% of secular professors at state schools like ASU teach some form of Marxism. They teach directly out of the Communist Manifesto. That's their philosophy of history. And so what happens to free speech when there's no intellectual diversity? And what is your committee going to be looking into?
Well, first of all, in the first committee, one of the comments that I made, and I don't know if you, I think you were there. Um, Whenever we have a single idea coming from a single source, if you look back in history, um, you see Ho Chi Minh, Pol Pot, Stalin, Hitler. You have those kind of people being developed, and eventually will take over a nation and people. And so I worry when you step onto a college campus, which was originally designed to teach young children how to uh, get a skill in life in order to survive.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's going political to a point where either you're with us or you're not with us. And so you have this singular view being taught to our young people. And we're trying to make that, to try to avoid it, or you know, get rid of that
Mm-hmm.
idea. And so in the first meeting, we were wondering why people like Mr. Atkinson had to be fired, and the speakers coming on campus, why are they being restricted and vilified as, you know, right wing
Mm-hmm.
Nazi or whatever the term they were using?
Yeah, white
Um,
nationalist
it,
bigots. It was Dennis Prager and Charlie Kirk.
exactly, exactly. So why do we have to go there?
Yeah.
Why not bring people in to teach different views? But at
Yeah.
the same time, you can see the protests to support Hamas. You can see protests to support communism um, being
Yeah.
displayed on campus.
No
And we
professors
need
have
to
spoken out
understand.
about that. As I understand it,
No,
no
no.
professors have spoken out in favor of Israel or against the pro Hamas rallies at ASU, but they did speak out about the dangerous Dennis Prager.
Yeah, let's go to the reason why we have the second meeting. You remember ASU had 30 days to produce a report,
Mm-hmm.
right? 30 or 60 days, I can't remember now, to produce a report. So what do? They investigated themselves. Here's the problem I have with that 75-page report is nowhere in there um, anybody interviewed the students who filed complaints.
Mm-hmm.
So me, I'm not a cop, I'm not an investigator, but if I were to be an investigator, I would want to hear both sides, right? So in my day job, which is the chairman of judiciary, how can I hear a bill with only one side testifying at the podium. I have to hear both sides. And I was hoping ASU would see it the same way and say, hey, let's talk to the professors. Let's talk to the kids. In this case, how can you be um, objective if you only hear one side and make the decision on the one side that you heard?
Yep.
And so in this next coming meeting, I don't like to sort of let people understand what I'm about to do, but at the same time,
You can keep a secret.
in the next meeting, is there a reason for me to ask ASU any questions? Because everything is already in the 75 page, which is, I think, is totally not objective. So,
Yeah, it's usually, I mean, I think it's a general principle that you don't have someone under investigation investigate themselves, right? That would be true if the IRS is auditing you. You don't, the IRS doesn't say, hey, will you audit yourself for us? And it's true in criminal law. You don't tell the criminal, hey, why don't you put on a trial and tell us if you're innocent or guilty? They'll say, okay, I'm innocent. So it's a very strange system to say, ASU, we think there's some problems. Investigate yourself. But we both know the person or the group that should be investigating them is ABOR, the Arizona Board of Regents. Why aren't they doing it?
right, right. So let me just put it this way. If I were to be super political, and if I were to be at least trying to look like I'm being fair, interview both sides, then still come up with the same result. At least it looks like you're being fair.
Mm-hmm.
This is just blatantly saying, hey, I talked to the professors. That's clear enough for me to make a decision.
Yeah. Well, I'm also curious your thoughts about, you know, what, 2.5 weeks ago now, 3 weeks ago, Israel was attacked.
Right.
And across the nation, we've seen professors speak out against Israel. And they've used a phrase, settlers. And some of them have even said that settlers aren't civilians, meaning that they're fair objects for military attacks.
Mm-hmm.
So if a settler is attacked, and they would say all of the people in Israel who were attacked were
It's a
settlers.
dirty term now, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a dirty term now. Settler
But
is a dirty term now.
yeah, it is. And yet I know that I have colleagues who teach about settler colonialism. And at ASU West right now, there's an art exhibit about settler colonists, colonials. Um, that's pretty bad timing. Can we do anything about this? I mean, it looks like anti-Semitism.
Oh, it clearly is. So let me go, Dr. Anderson, is it okay if I go back to where I was, 180 years ago in my old country? My dad actually fought the French. They colonized Indochina back then for 180 years. My dad fought the French. He hated the French, went and fought the Japanese after World War II, coming back to fighting the French again, right? So he's got 40 years of war under him. And then he wound up, fighting communists for 19 years before he retired. So let me just say that while I dislike the French very much, you have to remember, if they hadn't been there, and I'm trying to look at the positive thing, if they hadn't been there, we wouldn't have roads, infrastructure, sewage system, water system, anything, right? So while I dislike the concept of colonialism, I also have to look at modern day convenience that I sort of enjoy as well.
Yeah, in other words,
Um,
I think the standard problem with Marxism is it's so simplistic. So it just divides the worlds into oppressors and oppressed, or colonizers and colonized. And you're suggesting, hey, there's more to the story than that.
yeah, well, if you look at the history of Vietnam, you have to consider everything that happened for the 2,000 years, right, of written history. So you have the domination of the Mongolians and the Chinese for over 1,500 years. I mean,
Yeah.
that was pure rape and destruction, right? The French came, it wasn't any better, but at least there was some form of infrastructure built, so that modern day Vietnam can be what it is today. I mean, you can date all the high rises all the way back to the time of the French occupation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
all the way down to the baguettes that we get every morning.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a type of bread, the yummy bread. Well, but so coming back to the secular universities, what can be done to make sure that, say, a Jewish student knows that they're safe and respected on a state campus where they're being called settlers?
You know, it's hard for me to wrap my head around that only recent history, there's a group of people led by Hitler, um, killing Jews, vilifying, demonizing Jews. And here we are back to the same habit again. But now we're calling these guys, Hamas, the Palestinians, or whatever it is. We are now honoring them for what they've done 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, at state
So
universities, which
how,
should be.
yeah, so how do you justify? How do you justify um, one side killing, beheading babies, raping women, killing retirees, and kidnapping people? And the retaliation is now unacceptable.
Yeah,
So
yeah, and the places.
how do we get there? And especially at the university level, how do we get there and allow such thing? Now, I'm not saying that you have to oppress the First Amendment at the university level. I'm not saying that. But if you're gonna do one, you have to do it for the other.
Yeah,
You
well, and
you
there are
can't tell
there.
Dennis Prager to not come and then allow
Yeah,
Hamas supporters to protest.
yeah, or minimally, what would happen is the professors who were against Dennis Prager will probably say, we just didn't want our name on the event, but we don't care if he comes to campus. However, they don't write anything about these Palestinian Hamas rallies. So it's
Uh-huh.
very one sided. They only object to conservatives, they don't object to anyone else. And we should add that ASU's policy prohibits any activities that promote terrorism. So we both know free speech is not anything you want whenever you want. You can't yell fire in a crowded movie theater. And so you can't
Exactly.
come to a state university and promote terrorism. That's prohibited.
Right, right. And uh, correct me if I'm wrong. Recently, didn't they say it was okay to have a meeting regarding calling for the revolution for communism?
Yeah, well, I don't
This,
know the details
look,
of it, but the Palestinian rally is supported by the Arizona Communist Party.
yep,
If you look
yep.
on
They
their,
call
you
them
look
they
at their
call
poster,
themselves the
they've got.
socialist something. It's called socialist something.
Yeah, well, they've got the
Same things.
poster with
Yeah,
like 10 different
yeah,
symbols of different groups.
right.
One of them is a student group that wants to take back the Southwest to give it to Mexico, and not through legislative means. So that's another student group that's pro Palestinian rally. So it's a real interesting conglomeration of groups and their viewpoints about essentially hating the United States.
Right, right. And I'm just totally confused all the time, Dr. Anderson. When you live in this great country that would actually allow you to have cell phone, um, the ability, the technology, to then turn around and protest against the people who created a beautiful life for you. I'm just totally confused all the time now.
Yeah, I am too. But I wonder. One thing that came to me recently was if you're constantly talking about something that happened 100 years ago, 200 years ago, nothing can really be done about it. I mean, a lot of time has passed since then. And so you're kind of safe to say whatever you want. Like, because 150 years ago, the United States bought parts of Arizona from Mexico, we should give that back. It's kind of a non-starter. Like, of course, that's not going to happen, but it makes you look like you're virtuous and you're really concerned about justice. So it's an interesting way to position yourself in comparison to if you talk about a current event that's a live event, then you have to put yourself on the line and say, no, I really think this should be what happens. This should be what comes out in a current event. So I wonder if that's part
Well,
of it is you can talk safely
yeah,
about the past.
exactly. Along the same line, how many liberals in blue California would want to give California back to Mexico? I mean, we paid $1 million for it, wasn't it? Like a
Yeah,
million
it's like
dollars for
1.2 or 2
California.
million
Yeah,
for the
yeah,
Gadsden purchase.
somewhere around there. So how many liberals in California would vote to give California back to
Yeah, they could
Mexico.
do it right now, right?
I'm just curious. Yeah,
I bet
yeah,
some of
I'm
them would say
curious.
it. I don't know how many of them would actually vote. Where if you get 51% of the vote, California is now Mexico again. I don't think they'd vote for that.
Yeah, I'm kind of wondering how many people from San Diego would vote for that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, hey, let me
Uh,
finish with this question. You and I have
yes,
talked
sir.
about this before, but since we're talking about racial bias at state universities, which they position themselves to say we're not biased, but this anti-Semitism stuff's exposing that. And I always am fascinated by your story because you faced racial bias. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
You know, it's really interesting because I didn't have any of those problems until people found out I'm somewhat conservative on the far right side, right? So the first time I actually faced extremely negative comments where somebody actually called me um, a water boy for white people when I made my first speech publicly to support the Tea Party back in 2009. I started to see different views of how the left sees me, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then in 21, I believe Senator Quezada called me a white nationalist. Um,
Yeah.
and notice that he's not in the legislature anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a good thing. And then recently, I was attacked quite often about being a white nationalist. So when you and I decided to reply back to some of those comments,
Yeah.
I remember one person came back and said, you don't have to be white to be a white nationalist.
Yeah.
And so the racism to me, I would say 100% of the racism that I faced came from the left,
Is that interesting?
not from
Yeah.
the right. Yeah,
And it's
isn't
if you
that
have your own
interesting?
opinion. If you have your own opinion that differs from them, now you'll be called racist names. If you stay under them and you don't think for yourself, they'll leave you alone. So it's a kind of
Right,
a
right.
threat. It's a threat tactic.
Well, it's what's interesting is they sort of pigeonhole you into a certain situation, right? So if you're a minority, you should be a Democrat.
Mhm.
That's it. How dare you think for yourself and be a conservative
Mhm.
and actually carry conservative values? So,
Yeah. Well, and that's what will
you
happen
know,
is values like individualism, personal responsibility, a work ethic, mathematics, having citizens, free speech. Did I mention that one? Second Amendment. All of you keep going. These are the kinds of things that people will say, well, they call it a dog whistle for white nationalism. So if you're speaking about personal responsibility, they're going to call you a white nationalist instead of saying, wait, I mean personal responsibility for everybody, not just white people.
well, I'm in a special situation, and I most of the time I don't like to discuss it, but I'll discuss it today. The left is branding me as a white nationalist. The right is branding me as a not so conservative person. I'm not sure where I stand, but I can tell you this: as president of Arizona State Rifle and Pistol Association, no board members would ever vote for someone that's kind of flip flop,
Yeah.
being a conservative. I mean, you have to stand up and defend the Second Amendment all the way through. There's no middle ground when it comes to the Second Amendment. It's pretty much absolute, right? And
Yeah.
so, based on that alone, I find it very difficult for one side or the other side, or both sides, to criticize me.
Yeah.
I can only be on one side, and that's my side. But what I like about what I do every day is I get to think independently,
Yeah.
and I don't depend on a single group to tell me how to vote.
Yeah.
That's what being an American is all about. I
Mm-hmm.
don't like to be told how to vote, how to do things, who to follow, what to say, what to do, what to eat. That's the reason why I got away from Vietnam,
Yeah.
or
Yeah. And that's the
communist Vietnam now.
communist centralized government, right? So thank you for your work on those things. I really appreciate that you took time to talk with me today.
I appreciate it.
And I'm
I
going to keep,
appreciate our friendship.
yeah, me too. I'm going to keep everyone updated on this next hearing and what comes out of it because it's very important for parents in Arizona to have access to state universities. They're affordable and they're a great option. And so it's very sad when they've been made into partisan politics. And we want to make sure we
Yeah,
get partisan politics out of them.
Dr. Anderson, can I make a quick comment on
Yeah.
K-12?
Yeah.
Okay, so I, obviously I was born in a third world country, right? I came over here. I did okay. I learned the language, do the best I can, went to college. K-12 here is exactly opposite of how I think of education should be.
Mm-hmm.
So, like anything else, if you're going to design a car, you got to get good engineers. You have to have a good plan. You have to build a good prototype. You got to go to productions, right? Build a good car. And if the car fails, what do? You get rid of that car, right? And here we are. We look at education in the end result and we say, well, they're not doing so good. Why don't we dump more money into the system
Yeah.
instead of fixing the front end where the engineers are failing?
Yeah.
They're failing to teach. They're failing to get our kids to learn how to read, do math, and all this stuff.
Yep. Well, and
And the
think of the
result
time they're
is what?
spending on gender theory in K through
Right,
12,
right,
right?
right.
Instead of
And
what you just mentioned, math, reading.
right. So if you think I'm wrong, then why are we importing engineers from India,
Yeah.
China, the Philippines, and other places? Because we're not doing it right here. But
Yeah.
that's an entirely different
Well, it is
situation
worthwhile
there.
noticing every time someone says we need more money, if we just had more money, K through 12 will be better. I pull up the
Right.
chart of the countries in the world that are doing the best in K through 12 and the amount of money they spend. And it's not correlated to how much money you spend. So the United States spends the most and we don't do very well. So
No, we
saying, well,
don't.
we should pay even more and still not do well. Maybe we should look at the countries that are doing really well and imitate them.
Exactly. Instead of importing their engineers or their scientists, we should be producing engineers and scientists here.
Yeah. So K through 12 is
Thank you,
important
sir.
work as well. Yeah. Thank you. And K through 12 is important work as well. I happen to be at the state university where I see how much of the time is spent on partisan politics. And so thank you for your
Mm-hmm.
help in helping me get that out of the university and return it back to providing a public education for all parents, regardless of politics.
Great. I really appreciate your time, Dr. Anderson.
Yep. I'll keep everyone updated. Bye.
Thank you. See ya. Bye.